Hi, this is Ron Boring, and this is the first installment of the Boring Bits, which is my attempt to teach you what I think is the most important aspect of psychological research. Now, these aren't necessarily the things you're going to be tested on. These are the things I would like you to take home with you to remember in a year from now. So let's see how it goes. Now, this first part is about the building blocks of research, and here I just want to give you a few principles that I think will help you understand what research is all about, how we treat it in this class, and how you'll use that toward your proposal. The first principle is that research is discovery. There are a number of steps to include, and the first one is finding out what's been done before. This is your literature review. You're going to be doing an annotated bibliography, which is simply a research or literature review. You're going to look at what other people have done before. Very seldom do we have completely original research. So chances are that there's something you can build upon. And along those lines, what you're going to do is you're going to borrow the best ideas. In particular, we don't have the resources to validate tests and measures. So if you want to know the best measure of depression, chances are there's been lots of research done on that. In fact, we know there's been lots of research done on that, and you can use one of the tests that is available for depression. Now, the final part of this discovery is finding a unique piece of the puzzle that hasn't been answered yet. And this is the something new. This is what we're looking for in your research. So as you're doing your literature review, if you find that your topic has already been covered, find that angle that hasn't. Find that little piece that hasn't. Research doesn't have to blow you away with its originality, but it should be unique. It should be something new. Okay. Now let's look at the second principle, which is research answers questions about relationships. I'm not specifically talking about relationships between people here, but it could also be that kind. Specifically, I'm talking about relationships between two or more things. And you'll see this terminology. The independent variable is what you're controlling or manipulating. Some examples of this could be single or married, video game player or not, exerciser or not, monolingual versus bilingual person. Okay, these are the conditions that you're starting out with. You're looking at different groups of people. Your dependent variable is what you're measuring. And these could be things like academic performance, which would be grades typically, level of happiness, level of health, level of intelligence. And we really want you to focus on psychological factors here because this is a psychology course. So remember, it's about these relationships between two or more things. Don't just look at one thing, which is only exploratory. So some of you in your research ideas just threw out one topic, like mindfulness, as an example. Now, mindfulness is a great topic. Don't get me wrong on that. But you need to look at mindfulness versus non-mindfulness. Okay, you need to compare two things for it to be considered research in the context of this class. The scientific method requires statistics to compare two or more things and say if they're different or not. And that's why we have this comparison emphasis. If you just describe something, you can't run statistics on it, right? You need statistics to say group A versus group B, that they are significantly different or not. And that's really the basis of this. That's not to say that's the only way to do research, but the method, the scientific method we're teaching in class is really about comparison using statistics. Now, the third principle is that research uses hypothesis testing. This goes hand in hand with the other points I've made here. You've heard this term. This is so often misunderstood. The null hypothesis, which is often written as H subscript 0, it really says that there is no difference between groups. And the counterpart of that is the alternate hypothesis, that there is a difference between the groups. Now, for the null hypothesis, remember that the word null means no or zero. So what the null hypothesis is the no or zero difference hypothesis. That's all it is. You're just saying that there's no difference between two groups. Okay? The alternate hypothesis says that there is a difference. And what you're doing in research is you're simply seeing if they are the same or if they are different. Are two groups the same or different? If they are the same, you're confirming the null hypothesis. If they're different, you're rejecting the null hypothesis. Now, this is all fancy terminology, but it's all about comparing groups again. That's the essence of the research that we're teaching you in this class. And your goal is to reject the hypothesis. You want a difference between these groups because you don't just want to say that it was chance or that there is no difference between these groups. You want to see that something actually happened, that there was a cause and effect, okay? The fourth principle is that Research compares groups of people. I've already said this, but I just wanted to make sure that I drove that point home. The independent variable represents different groups of people. For example, simple or married, or poor, middle class, wealthy. Okay. Typically, these are categorical. That just means they fall into one category or another. But it also could be a continuous scale, like the wealth one I've presented you there. And you can compare the effects of the independent variable. Okay. That's what you're testing. The dependent variable is you're measuring, for example, intelligence of single versus intelligence of married. Marital status is your independent variable. The intelligence is what you're measuring, the dependent variable. And the dependent variable should always be something measurable, like skill or happiness. And the fifth principle is that research can either be a study or an experiment. Okay, and I want you to make that distinction. Most of what I saw in your research ideas were studies. They weren't true experiments. A study is simply observing two or more groups of people, but not changing anything, not manipulating anything. So you're just taking two groups of people in the wild and seeing if there are any differences between them. And the problem with this is that the findings will only be correlational because you're not controlling for everything. It's possible that there are confounds. It's possible that even if you find a significant difference, that it may not be caused by the variable that you're wanting to study. So the way we get around that is we manipulate something. We hold everything else constant and we change one thing. We introduce something new to a group. And that's an experiment. You change the conditions for one group versus another. You give one group marital therapy on one method and another group you don't give that, and you see what the outcomes are. If you're in education, you follow one educational practice with one class and not with the other, and you compare the outcomes of those two classes. You're assuming everything else is the same, and if there really is a difference between those two groups, then you can say that there is cause and effect. And this is more conclusive than the correlational studies. I'm not going to take points away from you if you only come up with a correlational study, but I want to challenge each of you to think of how you might change something, how you might manipulate something to have a true experiment. These are the 5 principles that I want you to take with you. I hope they're helpful. Look forward to talking more with you in class about them. Thanks.